Good afternoon again, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us. This is Marissa Frieder. I'm going to be our moderator today. I just wanted to give a couple more minutes. I know we have some people that are logging on, and it could be the first time we're using this GoToWebinar, but don't you worry, we will be getting started in just a minute or two. Okay. Right, well, good afternoon, everyone. Once again, my name is Marissa Frieder, and I am here with us today from WorkWell NYC. This is our very first webinar, and we're very excited that you were able to join us. Before I introduce Elizabeth Solomon, who will be our speaker today, I'm just going to tell you a little bit about WorkWell NYC, who we are, and what we do. So if you haven't heard of us before, we're glad you're here. WorkWell NYC is the city's worksite wellness program, and we're here to help you live well and work well. Our goal is to create work sites that make it easier for all of our employees, all of you, to live healthy and active lifestyles. We know that health is more than just not being sick. It's physical, it's mental, it's emotional, it's environmental, financial, and we know it exists on a spectrum. And so we aim to be here for you with health and well-being resources, programs, and support no matter where you are on your health journey. We have a range of different programs from Weight Watchers, fitness classes, diabetes prevention, and we encourage you to visit our website to learn more. But today we're here to talk about healthy eating. Healthy eating is absolutely essential for living a healthy lifestyle, and combined with being active, it can reduce your risk for so many chronic conditions. We've heard from you that there's a lot of interest in learning more about healthy eating, and that's why we're here today. And so before we get started, we just want to do a quick poll to hear from you about what brought you here today. So you'll see the poll on your screen in just a minute, and select the answer that applies to you the most. All right, it seems like the majority of people want to learn how to make healthy meals. People want to learn how to improve their health. About 62% of you picked both of those. And luckily for you, we have Elizabeth Solomon here today. Liz is the Assistant Director for Healthy Eating Programs at the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene. She's a registered dietitian and nutrition extraordinaire. And so we have her here today, and she will also be joining us the next 3 Wednesdays. We have 3 more webinar Wednesdays coming up, Making Meals Fun, What's in Your Food, and Sip This, Not That. So I'm going to hand it over to Liz and just remind you one more time to mark your calendars for our upcoming webinars. So Liz, take it away.
Thank you, Marissa. Before we get started, I just am going to go over the agenda, what we're going to talk about today. And so glad you're all here, and thank you for having me. We're going to discuss the framework for healthy eating called MyPlate. We're going to look at whole versus processed foods, What are they? How do you eat more of them? And then we'll finish with some tips for cooking healthy meals. So after today's workshop, I hope that you'll be able to understand the basic concepts of MyPlate to guide your healthy eating. And I hope that you leave here knowing how to identify and choose fewer processed foods. So this may look familiar to you. Here is a picture of MyPlate, and you may recognize it as the USDA's food guidance system for the country. It's a tool to guide your food choices. And the plate represents each of the 5 food groups, which are fruit, vegetables, protein, grains, and dairy, and shows you how these together to make a healthy meal. There are 2 concepts represented in the plate, proportion and variety. So proportion is about how much of each of these food groups. And the recommendation is to make half your plate fruits and vegetables, about half of your plate grains, choosing whole grains at least half of the time, and about a quarter of your plate lean protein foods. Dairy foods are a good accompaniment to meals, and low-fat plain dairy foods are recommended for anyone over the age of 2. Variety means getting all different types of food, and the meal represented on the plate, again, contains all 5 food groups. So while it may be difficult to eat food from all 5 food groups at every single meal, it's important to include foods from each food group in the meal, in your meals and snacks that you eat throughout the day to ensure you're getting a variety of foods. This will make sure you're getting a variety of nutrients in your diet. So this is an example of what a plate might look like with real food. So on this plate, water is present, and notice that sugary drinks like soda, iced tea, juice drinks are not. It's easy to eat too many calories from added sugar in a day, so why waste them on sugary drinks? We won't be speaking too much about beverages today, but as a reminder, look for the lunchtime webinar on March 28th, where we'll discuss sugary drinks and healthy beverages in detail. Plate planners are available on the New York City Department of Health website in a variety of languages that highlight different cuisines. Plates are available in Punjabi, Korean, Bengal, and Filipino. You can access them by visiting nyc.gov/health and searching for plate planners. Notice on these plates there are many foods you can make within each food group. And one thing they have in common is that they're all contain minimally processed foods. So we're going to talk now about what that means. A strategy to use to make healthy food choices is to choose whole foods and minimally processed foods more often than highly processed foods. What are whole foods? Whole foods are foods to which nothing is added and nothing is taken away. So when a food is processed, unhealthy fat, sugar, which are all ingredients that can contribute to your risk of developing a chronic disease, usually get added. And what usually gets taken away during processing? Well, vitamins, minerals, and fiber, which are all components that contribute to the nutritional value of food. So on the screen, you see some examples of whole foods: fresh fruits, vegetables, whole grains, legumes, and eggs. You can think of all these foods as being on a spectrum of whole foods to highly processed foods. We all eat foods from the entire spectrum, but choosing to eat mostly from the whole foods or minimally processed foods side of the spectrum is a strategy you can use to eat healthier. So let's take a look at what that means. As you can see on the screen, I have an apple pie, and unsweetened applesauce. So think to yourself for a minute how you might put these 3 foods on a spectrum from most whole to most processed. And I'm going to pass it back to Marissa for another quick poll.
All right, so you will see another poll come up on your screen. You'll see another poll come up on your screen in just a minute, and we'll ask you to put the 3 foods in order from most whole to most processed. All right, so you guys are so smart. 95% of people got the answer correct. It's the apple, and then the applesauce, and then the apple pie is the most processed. And so I'm going to hand it back over to Liz to tell us more about why.
Great, thank you. So, as you can see, the apple is the most whole food and the healthiest of these three options, and you all mostly got that. This one's sort of an easy example, and we'll get to some more complicated ones later. The most processed food is the apple pie, which again has a lot of added ingredients that increase the amount of sugar, salt, and fat it contains. The unsweetened applesauce is slightly processed. It may have a peel removed and it's mashed or blended to make a very soft consistency, but it's also a healthy option sometimes. So I told you that the applesauce is unsweetened, but if you saw this product at the store, the only way you would really know that there were no sugars added was by looking at the ingredients list and nutrition facts label. We won't be speaking too much about nutrition facts labels today, but look out for the lunchtime webinar on March 21st, where we'll review labels in detail. You can also make this applesauce yourself at home and control what ingredients you add or take away. You would just simply peel a few apples, or better yet, leave the peel on, chop them up, and add them to a pot with a little water, a little cinnamon, mash it with a fork, and then cook it on low to medium heat until they're soft enough to mash up. Note that if the applesauce was sweetened with added sugar, it would move on the spectrum closer to the apple pie. Added sugars make a food more processed. So let's now look at the concepts applied to other foods in the fruit and vegetable group. On the left side of the screen are all the whole fresh fruits and vegetables that are the most whole and the most healthiest option. Frozen fruits and vegetables go directly next to fresh, as they're usually very minimally processed. They typically have nothing added and retain almost all of their nutrients. Similarly, canned fruits and vegetables lose some nutrients during processing, but can still be good options and can contribute to a healthy diet. When you're choosing canned fruits or vegetables, there's a few things you can do to make them more healthful. You can buy fruit packed in 100% juice, not in light or heavy syrup. You can buy low or no sodium canned vegetables, and then when you get home, you can rinse them before eating. You can buy frozen fruits and vegetables with only the fruit or vegetable listed in the ingredients. So no other ingredient in the frozen fruit or vegetable should be listed, except itself. On the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see the most processed versions of fruits and vegetables, such as French fries and potato chips, which are made from potatoes, and apple pie, which has a small amount of apple in it. They're the least healthy because they contain a lot of added sugar, salt, and unhealthy fat. You also see fruit gummies, which have very little fruit and are mostly added sugar. Now let's look at the grain group. Here we have some crackers, whole wheat berries, pastries, whole wheat bread, and white pasta. These products are all made from wheat, which is a type of grain. They too can be put into the most whole to the most processed. So take a minute to think about how you might put these foods in order from most whole to most processed. So as you can see, the whole grain berries are the most whole foods, and in this case, they're the healthiest option. The most processed grain on this slide are the pastries, which have a lot of added ingredients. So let's learn a little more about how grains get processed. So the grains we eat are actually the seeds of some plants. And the picture you see is a rice plant and what a rice grain looks like. Examples of other whole grains are wheat, oats, rice, bulgur, barley, corn, quinoa, buckwheat, amaranth, and sorghum. The grain kernel, or seed, consists of three main parts. The outer shell, called the bran, contains fiber, vitamin B, proteins, and trace minerals. The inside section, called the endosperm, contains mostly carbohydrates and some protein and a small amount of B vitamins. And the small section, called the germ, contains also B vitamins, vitamin E, trace minerals, and phytonutrients. So whole grains are foods that are made from this entire grain. The wheat berry I showed earlier is an example. Brown rice is also an example, and you get all the benefits of eating the whole grain when you eat these foods. Looking at the top of the screen, we see how whole wheat flour is made. To make flour, the entire whole grain is milled to give us whole grain flour that's used to make whole grain products, such as whole wheat bread, whole wheat pastas, etc. The benefits of eating whole grains are retained in these products because the whole grain is used to make the flour. The bottom half of the screen shows how white flour is made. To make refined or white flour, the outer bran or germ is removed, leaving behind only the endosperm, which is then milled to make white flour. So when you're removing the bran and the germ, fiber and nutrients are lost during this product. The white or refined flour is used to make white grain products, such as white bread, pastas, and cereals. There is some complication though. So by law, refined flour must be enriched by adding back key ingredients that are lost when the germ and bran are removed. The fiber is not added back, and this is a key nutrient we miss out when choosing refined grains more often than whole grains. Since whole grains are the healthier option, the dietary guidelines for Americans recommend making at least half of your grains whole grains. So let's apply our whole foods concepts to the other foods in the grain group. Some more examples of whole grain foods and products are shown here. So on the top, we have the brown rice and wheat berries, as we just discussed. Right under are oats, which are flattened oat seeds, corn tortillas, and whole wheat bread. These are all examples of whole grain products that are minimally processed. All are healthy options within this group because, as we just learned, whole grains provide the most fiber. We also just learned that as grains become more processed, such as white pastas and white rice, they lose nutrients such as fiber, but they can still be good contribution options and contribute to a healthy diet. So the white pasta and white rice are in the middle, as they're slightly processed and made from refined grains rather than whole ones. Granola bars are also in the middle, but how they're made and what they're made from determines where on the spectrum they might go. Some granola bars are made with whole grains, nuts, and dried fruit, and others might have tons of sugar. So labeling becomes an important strategy for foods like this. And as you'll see on the right, the most processed grains are things like pastries, sugary cereals. They're the least healthy for you because they contain a lot of added sugar, salt, and unhealthy fat. We're going to move on to the protein group. Dry beans are a whole food because nothing is added and nothing is taken away. You might add something like salt during the cooking process, but generally that's it. Canned beans are also a good option. Sometimes very little is added to a canned bean, making it almost as healthy as a dry bean. And as we discussed earlier, you can buy low-sodium canned beans or you can rinse them before you use them. This will decrease the amount of salt you're eating. Looking back on the left side of the screen, you'll see other whole proteins such as nuts, fish, chicken, breast, and eggs. And these are generally the healthiest options because they're the most whole and least processed. If you're choosing meat, look for lean meats to limit unhealthy fats. And as protein foods become more processed, such as meatballs that you might make at home, they become less healthful but can still have a place in an otherwise healthy diet. The most processed on the right-hand side are bacon and hot dogs. They're the least healthy options because they contain a lot of unhealthy fat and salt. One other thing to note is that the way that you cook and prepare your foods plays a huge role in how healthy it is. So this generally applies to all food groups, and we'll explore your cooking methods briefly later in this presentation. The last food is dairy, and the whole versus processed rule gets a little bit complicated. In the case of dairy foods, processing can sometimes make a food healthier. For example, processing cream to remove some of the saturated fat gives us whole milk. As more saturated fat is removed, the milk becomes lower in fat and lower in calories, making it healthier. So you may have heard some conflicting information about saturated fat and whole milk. Until more research is completed, the Dietary Guidelines for Americans still recommends for anyone age 2 years old or older to consume low-fat or fat-free dairy. So this would be skim and low-fat plain milk and yogurt. And they are recommended because they provide good sources of calcium, vitamin A, D, and protein, and they have less saturated fat and calories than other dairy products. If you're lactose intolerant, you can look for unsweetened non-dairy milk. So the least healthy dairy foods are those with a high fat content and with more added sugars and salts. These include ice cream, flavored yogurts, flavored milk, and processed cheeses. So consume these foods and drinks more sparingly. Okay, this brings us to some strategies for eating more whole foods. We've learned about whole foods versus processed and using the framework of MyPlate, but we'll talk a little bit more about specific strategies of how to actually get those whole foods. One is because all fresh fruits and vegetables are whole foods, buying and eating more fresh fruits and vegetables is the easiest way to eat healthier. Remember, frozen fruits and vegetables are usually minimally processed, so they're great choices too. Another strategy is to bring whole foods for snack time, such as whole fruits, carrots, nuts, hard-boiled eggs, plain yogurt. You get the most out of your snack by focusing on whole foods snacks rather than processed ones. The third strategy is to cook at home more often. Cooking at home helps you identify and control exactly what's going into your food and allows you to use more whole foods in your cooking. We'll talk more about this on the next slide. When shopping, use the ingredient list and nutrition fact labels to find out what's in the food. When purchasing whole grains, look for 100% whole on the front of the package or whole as the first ingredient in the ingredient list. Look for ingredient lists that are fairly short. Frozen corn should just say corn, and try to buy items that have a short list of ingredients. Stay away when possible from products that have a lot of ingredients that are not easily recognizable to you. Check for added sugars in the ingredient list. Added sugars may be called high fructose corn syrup, brown sugar, fruit juice concentrate, honey, or many other various terms. Avoid food with these ingredients close to the beginning of the list, which indicates that the product has a lot of added sugar. And finally, review the sodium and saturated fat content on a nutrition facts label and choose foods with less than 5% daily value. Keep trans fats to 0. And when you're grocery shopping, start on the outside aisles of the supermarket. This is usually where most of the whole foods are. I'm going to finish with some tips for cooking at home. As I mentioned, cooking at home is a great way to eat healthier as you can control what you put in your food and you can use mostly whole ingredients. If you can cook more at one time, you can save lots of time later. Try to make big batches when you have time to cook, and freeze foods or use leftovers for another meal. I mentioned earlier that how you prepare your food can play a large role in how healthy it ends up being. Here are some tips for preparing your food in a healthier way. Remove visible fats from meats and skin from poultry. Keep the peels on your fruits and vegetables. Wash them well with water before eating and cooking, but keep those peels on. Use healthier cooking methods such as steaming, stir-frying, grilling, baking, and roasting. Use herbs and spices to flavor food instead of salt. And as we've discussed today, use MyPlate to plan balanced meals and be sure to balance processed foods with whole ones. So to finish up, I just want to suggest a homework activity for you to do to help you think about changes you want to make. You can use these, using these strategies and concepts, we learned today, you could draw a blank plate on a piece of paper and then draw a healthful meal that you want to eat. Think about the concepts we discussed, including eating more whole foods, eating a variety of foods from all 5 food groups in healthy portions, and using healthy cooking methods. Next, think about 1 or 2 specific actions you would need to make this a reality in your life. Finally, some resources available to you. So you can visit the New York City Department of Health website at nyc.gov/health to get lots of materials and information. We have a great healthy eating and active living guide. You can find the plate planners that I showed earlier and lots of delicious fruit and vegetable recipes. If you search for Farmers Market on our website, you'll also find information about how and where to access local produce, which is a great way to eat more fruits and vegetables. We have farmers market maps available, and on those maps you can find on-site free public nutrition education workshops that take place from July to November at a select set of farmers markets. The USDA has a variety of healthy resources available to you at choosemyplate.gov. And you can also get a lot of other resources from NYC WorkWell website. So I'm going to pass it back to Marissa to close us out.
All right. Thank you so much, Liz. We have time for a couple of questions. So if anyone has questions, please use the chat box on the side of your screen. While we wait to see if any questions come in, we want to hear from you. We want to make sure that we're developing webinar content that is relevant to you and meets your needs. So there's a survey link. Please copy it and copy paste the link into your browser. There's a few very short questions. We will also send out the survey link via follow-up email. And there's an opportunity to enter your contact information and get your very own WorkWell NYC MyPlate, so you can put all of the tips Liz gave you into practice. So Liz, let's see. Here's a question. Which are better, frozen vegetables or canned vegetables?
Well, if you think back to the whole foods versus processed foods spectrum, I would put frozen vegetables a little bit closer to the whole ones because they're typically harvested and then frozen right on the spot, and not a lot is nothing's added and really not a lot is taken away. Versus a canned vegetable may have some sodium in it. There's a little nutrients lost in the canning process, so I would say that if you have the choice, I would go for the frozen.
Great. And what are some healthy foods that you could suggest for breakfast for people who crave carbs early in the morning? What are some healthy carb options for breakfast, I guess?
Great. I think, again, you want to focus on whole grains, as I discussed. So things like oatmeal are really great, whole grain cereal, whole grain toast, whatever you like on it, maybe like some nut butter or low-fat cheese would be a good option. But you can also add fruit to whatever hot or cold whole grain cereal you are eating to get those extra fruits in.
All right. We'll do one more question. Someone wants to know if cooking in a wok is considered healthy.
Cooking in a wok is stir frying, and I would say that's a great option. You don't have to use a ton of oil, and you can use healthy oils to cook your foods. And the foods cook quickly in a wok, so you're not losing a ton of nutrients.
Great. So I know we have a few more questions that came in, but it is 1 o'clock. I don't want to hold anyone past their lunch hour. So we will follow up with you to answer those questions. Thank you everyone again so much for joining. We hope to see you next Wednesday for our Making Meals Fun webinar. We'll be talking about a lot of different strategies for having a happy and pleasant meal experience with young children who may be picky eaters. And please do fill out a survey. We will be sharing a recording of this webinar as well for those who are asking about reviewing the slides because we know there was a lot of great information and we went kind of fast. So thanks for stopping by. Enjoy the rest of your day. Stay safe and dry, and thanks so much for attending.